Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And before we get into our second segment of the day here on the show, I do want to remind you yet again that if you wish to contribute and interact with the show a little bit more directly while we are live streaming, consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Things, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Great way as always to contribute and interact. You can do a lot of different things. You can leave a comment or question or concern throughout the show and I'll be able to read it on air. Or you can click the Super Chat button, click the $sign in the comment section, leave a tip or donation. You can do the same at our website as well, gsmcpodcast.net. But overall, this makes the show that much better when you, my faithful audience, are contributing to it. So without further ado, let us jump right into today's second segment, going over some NFL fantasy starts of the weekend, second to last week of the fantasy football regular season before we get into some playoff talk. And this week truly established who you can rely on in certain regards, whether they be high-end talent, who you always want to start, or guys who came on late in the season and could continue to perform for you come playoff time. So without further ado, let's jump right into it, starting off with perhaps the best quarterback performance of the entire week with Sam Darnold. This guy has been incredible. He's not going to receive many plaudits in terms of end-of-season awards. He certainly is potentially not going to go to the NFL honors, even if he were nominated for MVP, but he's playing like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. He's top 10 in passing yards, completion percentage, yards per attempt, what have you, and this game proved it all. Yes, it was against a very weak Falcons defense, but it was generating a lot more pressure than in recent weeks. But Sam Darnold still, despite all that pressure, was able to extend plays, get the ball downfield, and most importantly, put points on the board to the tune of 34.58 fantasy points off of 22 of 28 passing, 347 yards, and a grand total of 5 touchdowns, one of his best performances ever. Not since he was potentially a Jet early on in his Jet career did he have as solid a performance as he had Sunday against Atlanta. And I feel like, a lot of people might not want to go into the postseason with Sam Darnold in any capacity, whether it be a QB1 or QB2 even, but he certainly is someone who has shocked us all in a delightful manner, and might be someone you might want to monitor should he land somewhere else and get another chance there. Because this season has proved that Sam Darnold is still a talented quarterback who went number 3 overall 6 years ago. And that's why I feel like this fantasy performance from him may not overwhelm you one way or the other in terms of deciding if you want to stick with him, should you have started him this season or not. But this is also in terms of the long term. I'm just not looking at this from a right here, right now perspective. Sam Darnold has proven that he can do this countless times. Maybe he might go back to struggling with a different team because Minnesota certainly feels like a perfect fit for him. But he's certainly proven everyone wrong in terms of how the season could pan out for him in Minnesota. And kudos to Kevin O'Connell as well for truly developing him into the scheme, allowing him to do a lot of things that make him comfortable, and ultimately really contending for the Coach of the Year award as well, which we might talk about in latter weeks. But in terms of Sam Darnold, in terms of fantasy perspectives, I really think this guy could be special for you in the postseason, but also in the long term, down the road in the next 3 to 5 years, should he find a new home and thrive there as well. But in terms of the running back position, this is a very unique opportunity for me to kind of apologize to Zach Charbonnet, someone who I said will never really be kind of an explosive back for my Seattle Seahawks. And he truly did have a great performance, and I promise I will never slander him again as a Seattle fan. But I gotta credit another guy who's really come on late in this season with all the question marks surrounding his position group on this specific team and what he's been able to do to help rejuvenate the career of his young quarterback. Let's talk about Chuba Hubbard here. Yes, Zach Charbonnet, I could have put him in here, but in the early window, no one impressed me more than Chuba Hubbard and what he means to this Carolina offense as it continues to find out more and more about Bryce Young. 26 carries, 92 yards, 1 touchdown in their near upset attempt of the Philadelphia Eagles on the road. And I think a large part of why Bryce Young is starting to feel so rejuvenated is because of the help he's receiving from his backfield. This isn't just down to Bryce Young immediately becoming better. It's coming down to the overall play of every single member of that offense as a collective unit. Yes, we can see major improvements in the mechanics and footwork perhaps, and the arm strength and accuracy of Bryce Young in the pocket, but if it weren't for guys like Chuba Hubbard, Bryce Young may still be the tentative, impatient quarterback who we saw early in his career. That's why I have to applaud Chuba Hubbard, despite the fact that, as a Seattle Seahawks fan, I always love sing the praises of unsung heroes in every win we have. But Chuba Hubbard, I simply cannot ignore for gutsy performances week in, week out over these last 3 weeks, and potentially, from a fantasy perspective, a potential flex option for you if you wish to make a deep playoff run, potentially a starter as well, because the Panthers are playing passionately these past couple of weeks, win or lose. They're going to be a tough out on the stretch for people, so look for Chuba Hubbard to continue to get meaningful touches in that offense as well. And then, so goes Sam Darnold, so goes Justin Jefferson. No surprise there. Technically not the leading receiver even in this offense, as Jordan Addison also had a fantastic day as well. But Justin Jefferson, he was someone who I pinpointed in my shadow report last week in terms of his match against A.J. Terrell, whether or not it will be more about him putting up nice numbers or opening up space. And the answer was both, because both him and Addison had career days. He had 7 receptions, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns, and I believe Jordan Addison had 1 more yard and 1 more catch than him in the same stat line. So ultimately, that game proved that both of them could work together. Now, they're going to have tougher games in the stretch, right? But this proves that Justin Jefferson is so multifaceted that even if Addison's going off, you can't slip up against him, because he has the ability to put up numbers as well. This is the first true time this season where Minnesota had both of their receivers be so impactful in a game. And yes, people are definitely going to hammer home the fact that Atlanta is not a defense who you're going to be facing come playoff time if you're the Vikings. But I was really pleasantly surprised to see Jefferson also stand out in this one as well, because these past couple of weeks were all about developing the other weapons in this offense and Justin Jefferson simply making space for them. But now we know that he, as well as Addison, can coalesce. And that's how this potent Minnesota offense can continue to get better and more dangerous. So kudos to both Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson being dynamic in this one and kind of a revenge game against the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, not necessarily a revenge game, but certainly wanting to compound Kirk Cousins' misery. So that's why it's kind of a revenge game. But I digress. Last but not least, in terms of tight ends for this week, not a lot of solid overall tight end performances, but Pat Freiermuth seemingly was the most timely in their win over Cleveland and getting their own revenge for that weird snow game 2 weeks ago. Leading receiver, surprisingly, without George Pickens for the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2 receptions, 48 yards, and 1 touchdown. And that's the beauty of Pat Freiermuth, right? This is just a very bizarre guy. This is just someone who either makes his impact known in small spurts or truly steps into a role as a go-to target for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, no matter who the quarterback is. He's had a lot of quarterbacks in his career, and so with Russell Wilson, who knows what can happen with him? Who knows what can happen with him come playoff time if the Steelers should get there. But overall, Pat Freiermuth is someone who I have to acknowledge in terms of him being one of those tight ends who you're not necessarily saying is in that first tier, right? You're not necessarily considering him anything special, but he's certainly kind of 1A, 1B range, maybe 2A, 2B range for the tight end position. But overall, all of these 4 guys, really, really dynamic players. There were definitely a lot of other players I could have talked about. For example, Zach Charbonnet. He really, really could be a treat. if, Kenneth Walker continues to be out with that calf injury. We really don't know many details about that calf injury, but if he continues to be out and they continue to entrust Zach Charbonnet and entrust this offensive line, most importantly, which had his best game this year because of the continuity they were able to gain these past couple of weeks with that starting five up front, then Zach Charbonnet could be more than what I said before about him, a home run hitter. And what about the front runner for the MVP award? Let's talk about Josh Allen. Even in a loss, this guy continues to prove he's the MVP of the National Football League this season. 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns. Not since the great Otto Graham in the 1954 NFL Championship did a quarterback put up that stat line. Think about that. Josh Allen is a truly special player, a truly special athlete. He hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to prove he can be the face of this league, and maybe if he just wins this one MVP award, people will still doubt that he is. But he's quickly becoming it, and even though the Bills took a really tough loss in a really bizarre game where they put up that many points without turning the ball over, truly unheard of in the NFL, Josh Allen proved his might. And you had guys underperforming a little bit, quote-unquote, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts for the Eagles, and others as well. Potentially, some Cardinals players in that loss. I don't want to harp on that and harp on, the Seahawks being unbeaten in that rivalry, but the Cardinals definitely disappoint me in this game. I did say there was a chance that they would be able to match whatever the Seahawks offensive output would be in this game, but I was mistaken. Kyler still looks a little bit erratic in the pocket in that one. Marvin Harrison can't get going. And surprisingly, Trey McBride, who's had a solid past couple of weeks, simply could not get going until late in the game in that one as well. So ultimately, whether disappointment or overperformance, overachievement, fantasy stars this weekend were not necessarily few and far between for you. And it's going to be really important come playoff time to continue to pinpoint the unsung heroes and the high-end talent to truly create that balance in your team, because it's all about balance, like I love to say, when you're playing fantasy football this late in the year. But to conclude this segment, coming up next, we're going to be talking about the first of our positional rankings for the final week of the fantasy football regular season, starting with our QBs here and who could potentially get you into the playoffs if you're potentially still looking to get in there or to help you bolster your case as the top team in your league. So we'll be right back after this short break to talk about that.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk